right, welcome to the practice this morning for your home session. I think I got everybody muted. Okay, so what you're going to do is put your seat on the bolster that's lengthwise. It's when you sit onto this height, you want to get the spinal basin to feel like it's kind of elongating the front of your spine. So let's just kind of feel this orientation out. The belt is buckled up at the top of the thighs. You're going to have your sand bag nearby. And as you elevate your feet on the blocks will be movable. It'll be an interesting array of sequencing, but we might as well step our level up a little bit with how we make these imprints in our circulation. So we're going to focus as we lower down, knowing that you may need to get back up and reorient, that the bottom tips of the shoulder blades are on the bolster. And then keep in mind, you can always be farther forward on the bolster and slide back. I don't want you to be in the middle of the bolster and then have to get back up. So when I'm here, I'm working on this puccinus through my ribs. So there is this breadth of experience of width, kind of a blossoming in the ribs. And then I want to make sure that my shoulders just basically barely touch down. And for me, that feels like I'm a little far back on my bolster. So I'm going to scoot forward. And then as you keep doing this until you find like, I've got it, you'll do a few sit-ups to do that. And then as you slide back, you just want your blanket lightly. You might have to readjust your clothing as they fall off. That happens with this pose. It's part of the pose problem. And then your legs can go forward on the blocks. And either your heels are kind of on the other side so the legs do not rotate out, or you push your blocks forward and you put your heels on the blocks. Now, I feel like this is the generic instruction as heels are on the blocks. It's not too bad. I can see why that would be recommended, but if you prefer them on the other side so it holds the legs in those kind of boundaries, and then add your sand at the very front of your thigh lids. Orient that sand so it feels as if it's an actual delivery of weight across. Consider all the kind of the crossings of the props, right? The belt crosses over, the sand crosses above the leg and then down into the connective tissue. And then as that fascia elongates, maintain that the legs are an extension of the core, which is actually the inner thighs are considered an extension of the core. You can find that when we do a little bit of upright poses today, so that reach for the inner thigh through the psoas. And now as you open out your arms to actually cactus or straight open, either one, rest the spine into this kind of physical experience of regulating and opening the front of the spine. And then can you let your eyes center in? And as you wonder if this is exactly where your shoulders need to be, touching down, kind of notice that there's parts of the lower tips of the blades that relax into the bolster and some of the shoulders that fan out on the mat. So as the brain can kind of relax and recede back from its kind of boggling conversation about questioning the pose, could be part of it. Noticing that every pose, right, it focuses on the whole body. Right, there's a whole body experience with every pose. So feeling the entire experience and noticing if you need to reset your feet a little bit, slide them in if they really do try to rotate out, and you notice, maybe I'll put my heels a little bit on the other side of the block, and if that changes anything. Once things begin to settle, your postural habits do push back into the experience of your body. So we're trying to make an imprint to kind of give some mild direction to improve and support opening up. So I would encourage you, if you really do feel those knees and the feet really slide turning open, try to go the other direction with your toes, like you're pivoting them in. If there's a quivering in the legs, you can slide your sand a little bit lower on the thighs and it will make a difference. Tightening the belt down unlikely is going to change much unless you push the belt farther down, so that the legs reminding to keep them in that kind of mountain pose, which is what we focus on over and over again in these symmetrical shapes. So let's spend a few layered breaths here ahead with the inhale, belly rising, the lower tummy, and then on the exhalation, feel the belly relax back into a lengthened core. Eyes receding back into the skull. Now with a few moments with the shoulders pressing back and down, we're going to maintain really this level of lift of the pelvis to improve that circulation in the vital organs and to reverse gravity's downward pull on these abdominal spaces. So I want you to let the thighs feel where they relax, kind of notice in your fascia, right, how you rotate out, where it starts in your waist down into the frontal bones of the hips. And then we'll start to slide that sand away. And once that is gone, interlace your fingers and push the palms up and back overhead. The blanket's fairly low, so it will likely not really impede your progress of the lift over. And my feet, I'm letting them be passive and just kind of recognize a little bit of body recognition, where the awareness, the imprint is from this supported bridge pose in my body. For me, it's easily in my core. I don't have to do a lot to think that. But the places I start to notice have a little bit of challenge at staying positioned are my lower levers, right? So just noticing what we're going to fundamentally work with and help the circulation through. And so as you let go of the hand grip, reach forward to loosen up that belt. You don't have to completely take it away. If you want to get rid of it, that's okay. I'm going to loosen mine up enough that I can walk the feet up. Now, these blocks are way away from you at this point, so I'm going to encourage you to use a little bit of core bounding. So stepping one foot now to the side of your bolster. Use your other foot to kind of kick the blocks any direction, left or right, to the side of your bolster so that you'll easily be able to grab a hold of them. And then you're going to put both feet on the sides of the bolster, or if they're in front of the bolster. But I use my belt still to keep some proper awareness of the back of the leg direction. And as you push down, I want you to lift your hips up to that bridge pose. This is a little more of the real bridge that we're used to activating bridge, but they're all bridge poses that we're working through. And then you're gonna push the bolster just a tad so it's no longer under your shoulder blades whatsoever. It's behind the back of the pelvis, or you could say the pack of the pelvis. And then you'll walk your feet on top of the bolster, even if it's a tiny bit of it. And then as you lift up your legs to Viparita Karani, you might slide your blankie back so it's just barely under your head, knees bend, legs up. We are going to do this twice today. We're going to do one at the wall. So I want you to try this one. And if the belt can be snugged up around the upper legs, a little bit lower than they just were, but you still have your belt connected, and holding the thighs in that unity, slightly separate the knees and the feet, and then let the feet just be relaxed. Okay. Feel into the knees, even touch around the patellas, and kind of notice if you lightly touch onto those spaces where your shoulders lift, what your natural movement is in your upper back. So not trying to make a big change, but notice how much you put into one side of the back or the other. And then we'll lift our arms towards the ceiling. Turn the palms facing towards the back of your space. Turn the hands back. And keep the legs so they flow up, maybe a tiny bit away from you as your arms go overhead. And try to turn the palms so that the thumbs face out. You do the motion of the wrist, feeling the thumbs facing out. That's really, really important here. Okay. Now the ribs might be reaching in a strange way because your hands are turned this direction, right? It affects the rib cage. So feel if you can walk your hands out a little farther in your space behind you. Find where your limit is with the hands turning so the thumbs are out and the hands walk out. If your knees start to get a little closer, remind them to separate. And then bring your arms behind you, same reach. And then as you bring your hands towards the ceiling, okay, feel the shoulder blades lift up. So you're shrugging the shoulders, but you're actually lifting the arms up off the floor. And so you might feel that indent of the very inner line of the shoulder blade touch down and push. Okay, and then as you bring your hands to your belt, you want to unbuckle, and let's keep it close by. In fact, since we're here and it's always good to do more inverted time, we're going to make that belt, the buckle spacing a little wider from the connector, because I know that we're going to use this for under the ribs pretty soon. So I want to make some more width between those two and set that aside. And as I lower down my feet at the crease of the knees, you're going to spread your arms open and then come into a cobbler's pose with your feet on the bolster and your knees, of course, separating. And again, the inner thigh is that extension of the core, but not really the only core muscles, that core organ space right in the very center. So if the little centerpiece of the belly is pretty easy to push down, it's pretty squishy, I want you to work on scooting your feet a little bit forward. Maybe they're almost on the edge of the bolster. And then feel your back muscles and maybe scoot your shoulders back as if you're trying to press the lower back behind that spongy-ish core, right? The lower abdominal muscles. Feel that area press back into the bolster. Okay, so that's going to probably get your knees to lightly lift and tighten up. So your work is on let them go. This is fairly intermediate work with trying to get the legs here. So if you're feeling this is too much, your variation would be to get off the bolster with your legs, right? And then scoot it forward and have just your feet on it, not your spine or your pelvis. So with a few moments with this suggested reclining, elevated cobbler's pose. Come into your breath, let your eyes soften, and then feel the movement of the belly, keeping the flow of the lower back of the pelvis all the way into the lower spine. that sacroiliac space to press back into the bolster. Your glutes are probably pretty much in a peak experience right now. Glute peaks, even if you can't see them. Okay, now feel where the feet touch mildly. And then we'll start to move the weight of our buttocks down into the bolster. So if your legs are kind of shaky, there's a little resistance. I know there's resistance on the legs for this position. Now, when you bring your knees to motion back up, you're going to slide your feet so they're just right on the edge of the bolster on the sides. And I want you to try to kind of squeeze into the bolster with the side lower part of your inner leg, right? So the ankle spatially. And then as you push down to your feet, lift up the pelvis, and then be cautious on how much your chest pushes to your face. I want you to keep the lift like you're going towards the ceiling versus letting it shrug back. Slide your hands down to hold the bolster and then push the bolster forward so you're no longer on the bolster. Buttocks are no longer on the bolster. And then you're going to lower down and you'll get a feel for the body really close, like my rear touches the bolster a bit. And I'm going to place, if I can get a block, I'm going to put a block between my knees. And I want to keep this like the bolsters between my feet, okay? The block is between my knees, and now I'm going to take the block so it's at its widest setting. So it feels like it is a bit of a challenge, right, to begin. It might be welcome, so you have something to hold. But when you lift up your buttocks, stamp down into your heels, and try to feel your feet symmetry here. So I'm going to scoot my feet a little closer to my center, towards my hands, and then get a feel when I push down. I want you to try to keep that conscious direction of squeeze into the block and push down into your feet, lift up into a full bridge pose, and let the glutes, the glute media, so if you were to hold the side of your hips with your hands on each side and your thumb reaches around to the back, the buttock, you're going to notice that contracts. That's the idea. So when I contract into my glutes, which helps my back muscles be calm in the long run, safe work, you're going to feel that width in the knees, and it might feel kind of nice for the knees. No, it's not a lot of knee discomfort when they're this spaced out. So when you push down into your feet, lift up the pelvis, keep the pelvic floor lengthening, and bring your arms both overhead. Stay with the energy of pushing down for about another 15 seconds, pressing down, lifting up, pressing down, lifting up, especially if you deflate. Okay? And then as soon as you bring your hands up towards the sky, lower down, slide the block away, and then position your, actually, let's see how we'll start this. Let's take our belt. I want you to put your feet on your bolster, okay? And that might feel kind of nice for your back. You might squeeze the knees into the chest for a moment. We're going to lift up our hips. So you're just going to push down to your bolster, lift up your hips, and slide the belt, not the block, although that could be good. Slide the belt underneath your ribs, noticing that if I put my belt kind of high on my back, kind of rub it a little side to side, and then lower down my spine. I'm going to reach the belt around here, buckle up, not too close to your ear, and then loosen the strand up so that when you slide the belt, now my belt's pretty high up on my ribs, really pretty high. I can always slide it down. The only reason you would not want your belt under your armpits is if you were to move your leg, which we are going to go side to side, it might affect the chest comfort. That's the only reason. So that's, you can go as high as you want with the belt. So lift up your right foot into the belt, put your belt under that right foot, of course. And then when I slide my belt along, whether it's twisted or not, I'm going to stretch my left leg down on the bolster. Okay. So I'm going to scoot my bolster a tiny bit over so it's actually perfect for me under my leg. And that calf above is likely going to be responding to the experience right now. So before we add the sand, I want you to put your hands so that they're, in the arena of your ribs. Kind of either you can kind of cup the ribs so that the hands are in a halo above them, like they're expecting some vibrant life force to exude into the hands. And you could also rest your hands onto your ribs. But the key is that you kind of feel them respond to this belt and they kind of wake up a little bit. Interesting. They woke up from being on the bolster anyhow, so they're already feeling a little bit vibrant. Okay, so have the reach of that right foot. Send your arms wide out to the shape of T. And as the foot pushes, I want you to maintain that energy from the very low right side of your back into the right glute, right, the buttock, and then move that right leg over to the left. So I'm going to push into the belt. My belt is around the ball of my foot. You could be closer to your mid-arch or to your heel. Sample the directions, but feel when your right foot leans and pushes into the belt. That resistance, as long as the left leg remains on the bolster. Well, that's the trick. Keep that left leg on the bolster. Don't let it fall off. If it falls off, you'll start again. That's why you might move it over. Okay, now can you bend your right knee, even despite that you're leaning your right leg over to the left? Try to keep that spine, left side of your spine centered, right side of the spine starting to get a little bit more mobility from the push of the right foot. Good. Yeah. So when that leg is in the crossover, this is kind of a disciplined crossover pose. I mean, we can't go that far because we're held by the attachment of the belt. And now bending mildly to that right leg, bring the leg through the center. And then as you push into your belt, make sure it's resistance, right? So if your belt is too loose, you're not going to get the strength work going. So have resistance and then come back through, but keep going as you start to let the leg externally rotate. Now, that left leg can stay relaxed on the bolster. You can also bring your left heel closer towards the left buttock, slide it in on the bolster, and then bring the left knee open for half of Upavista, right? So we have an Ardha Upavista Konasana. Now, as that leg approaches external, feel the connection into your mid-back, to your upper bones of the shoulders. That's the reasoning for the rib cage centerpiece. And if it's pretty vulnerable for you, you might not want to have your left knee pointed out. If you do and you need a little prop, you might find that whatever you have nearby, like a block, is perfect for that. I can position my block below my left leg, and how nice is that? Okay, try to let that right leg stay so it's viscerally straight from the belly band to the heel band, open to the right. It's a belly band to heel band. So it's viscerally pretty high. Now, if you find that you can get your right leg a little bit higher over to your right side, towards your shoulder, not higher to the ceiling, you might feel that awareness by reaching down through your spine and through your sitting bone on the right leg, right? The left leg doesn't have much more to do. It's your anchor, okay? Now, reaching down through your sitting bone turns the inner thigh out, that right leg. Come back on up, don't speed it up, but go slow and safe. Okay, and then we'll take a moment here to straighten out the left leg if it was turned out. Okay, flex through that foot, reach up to your foot. Now, if I reach and I can get my foot, that's one educating guess you could work with. And you might like to reach up without touching your belt at first and see what your range is, and just accepting that, whether it's close or not. It's an issue of lengths, right? So feel where your reach is, and then can you center the back of your right hip so your foot's not turning too much out. Natural posture is going to be a little bit of a pivot at the big toe, right? That's our evolution. So you'll have a tiny bit of that big toe pivot open, but not the whole thigh flushing to a first position or anything. Now, can you hold the belt and bring your left foot up into it? I know this will be a bent knee experience, not a straight leg position. So feel your bent legs. And I would keep the belt the same range so you kind of identify with how your first side went, and then you'll track your second. But right now, arms are spread open, and you're going to let your legs slide a little bit. Your feet feel like they slide in the belt, but you're going to rock on the back of the pelvis side to side. But maintain that specific resistance with your back complex in your legs. And simplify the transition. Bring your right leg down onto the bolster. And my bolster is too far left, so you might need to push a little bit over. Okay, use all your coordination skills. And then as you flex that left foot, do you have to push the flex, or can you get the belt, kind of jimmy it up so that it just holds your foot the way you want it? So you don't have to put that kind of extra energy to forcing that artificial kind of like, it's like an artificial grin, right? You don't have to force it with your flexing of your foot. You can just let it be imprinted. I hope you don't imprint that on your face, but you know, the footprint sometimes on this position, like I mentioned, imprints in your posture, is usually if I put my foot up in a belt, I ought to flex it and do more and stress more. So what I want you to notice is when you try and you like force pulling, and then you sort of let it go, get your belt to the ball, and then notice if your calf feels sensation first. Start with the pressure down at the mid-rib, behind the ribs, right to the back, to the floor. Maybe touch your rib cage. Be sensitive to the softness of the abdomen. Let it rest. Feel the exhalation moving the diaphragm up and the core down. Now as it rests to the floor, can you cross the left leg to the right side? And when you have that hip delivery, feel the dynamic in the back of that left leg. Yeah, take it for a few more moments when you cross it over to the right. Now you certainly could bend your knee. You might notice on this side you need a little bit more slack for your leg to feel like it's getting to reach. I completely know that your right leg is antsy to get to rotate. But right now we're going to keep it so the pelvis is fixed. Well, it's not fixed, but it's kind of in the fix it mode right now. We're doing fix it yoga now. So feel the crossover of the left leg. Relax your arms, open. Yeah, give it some time, especially if it's grippy in your hippie and you're getting irritated. This is one that kind of bounces the brain a bit. Some people like that, you know, when it's kind of intense, and some recognize that's the body telling you something, like moving on. Okay, now feel when the leg stays straight. Okay, give it a final kind of sweep. Can you move your left leg over, or is it locked? Is that it? And that's okay. So when I move my left leg back to the center, I'm going to immediately slide my right foot on the bolster and then motion the knee open. And I like the block under the leg. Now, left leg goes open. I like the block. We're not using sand on the leg. If you want to do that in your home practice, it might be interesting to put the right knee out onto the block. The thigh has a block underneath it, the outer backing of the right thigh. And you might get away with the sand and get a little more opening as long as your leg is on a block. And if your leg is on a block, then it would be a little bit dangerous, right, for the ligament beds straining. So when the leg goes open, noticing what is comfortably accepting of the position and what is rigid and resistant. Right? It could be coming from your back that is resisting. So give it a few moments. Feeling if there is other aspects of the leg on that left side that allows you, that you can access to get that openness and flexibility for your leg, but then for your core, right? That's what we're coming into, is the inner thighs extension of the core and your back releasing. Now, as you resist with the left foot into the belt, practice resistance, and then push into that belt and feel the belly move with the breath, feel the rib cage, bring the leg back up. There's no rush. In this sequence, it's not going to get you anywhere. It's important to get these imprints. And then when you bring your leg towards the center line, it's sometimes a little shaky, you can let that right leg stretch straight down and then reach up for your foot. If you don't get your foot, you get something else, and you get a belt. Yeah, and if you have that ambition to get the foot, and you notice you get the foot, but your shoulders have now tightened up, your back and your stomach relationship is fairly inconsistent at that point. It's not necessarily a good core position, right? You kind of cramp up in the stomach and you have this posturing issue if you kind of get your foot. So I would encourage you to try to feel where that hold is on the belt with your hands, and then feel the back imprint into the floor. This might be one where you add sandbag to the right thigh. I know you've probably thought of that today, because we have done these poses with long ago, right, where we had the sand on the leg on the bolster, if you recall. Okay, last moments here with this belt situation. Okay, now when I have that leg positioned up, up, up. Okay, now as you bend through the left knee, take the belt off, and I want you to hold it with both hands. And of course, if I hold it, it tends to grip in some places of my wrist. So I'll put my legs on the bolster, And then maybe situate my tush so it's comfortably balanced there. And then bring my arms overhead like it stretches through your lats a little bit. There's an interesting back layer when your belt is on the band of your back muscles, the big wide swath of upper back and mid back, the whole back. It's a whole back situation. Trying to kind of peel those layers and lift the arms overhead for a few more moments. Good. Keep that motion, feel the reach of the arms. And then as you start to move your feet in on the bolster towards your tush, keep the arms in this position. If you're getting massive fatigue with the hands, I would hook your thumbs at the belt so the web between the thumb and the index is on the belt, not gripping your fingers, right? Does that make some sense? I have my hands touching, my hands into the belt. Then I slide my feet to the sides of the bolster onto the flooring. And then as I kick the bolster over to the right, so it's off of my foot experience right now, I'm going to bring my feet hips distance. I'm trusting that I can balance onto them. And I'm going to lift up my hips. I want you to try that too. So lift up your hips and then lift up your heels, lifting them up so the weight is on the balls of the feet. Most of us spend the day, unless we're wearing heels, right, that where weight is positioning in a funny way, right, into the heel print and then the outside of the foot occasionally. So try to lift up your heels here. Feel that proportion into your legs. And then as you lower down the spine, you're going to bring your arms up because that's going to help stretch your back. And then as the spine centers, bring your knees to your chest, take the belt away from around your hands, and then hug your knees in, hold the back of the legs. Just take a few moments of the squeeze, just to release the lower back. You might rock a little side to side. You might feel like you want to roll up into like a kind of like more of a boat pose for a second. You know, who knows, maybe that's something you want to do. And then chin in, come back, squeeze in, and then get the back muscles here, right? You could do a couple boat poses if you're feeling inspired. Straighten the right leg and then cross the left leg over to the bolster and get that bolster positioned far enough away from your mat that you're able to stretch your whole exterior leg. Remember, all poses are full body poses. So now we get a little more of this twist. So can you put your right hand on the outer band of that left leg? So from the buttock, where your hand can't reach that whole part of the leg, but you might slide your hand from the left exterior buttock down to the outer left knee and kind of press that leg towards the bolster so you know where you're going. And then add your sand to your outer left leg. Okay. Good. So I have the sand to that outer leg. And then, well, this is where that ball would have come in handy, huh? If you happen to have the ball nearby, you can use that. You could also use a block. You can use a blanket. You can use nothing. And then expand through the arms and give a few moments with your head turning to the left. Okay, the right leg could bend. It could straighten out. If you like the twisties, this is a good time to get some of that nourishment through the core muscles and that hydration into the spinal column. So the right leg bending, not necessarily putting the foot on your buttocks, but really feeling that bend of the right leg can be kind of interesting here. The bolster holds it back from any bad behaviors, right? So your right leg would be probably maybe touching the bolster a bit the more you bend it. And that right arm can touch onto the sand. It could cross over to your left arm. You could play with some of these ideas. Left hand holds the right elbow, stretches the deltoid, or stay with the arms flowing open. Let this make some imprinting into your hip. Maybe close your eyes. You may have had your eyes closed this whole time with a few little openings just to absorb the sensation and feel the belly move with the breath. Let the angle of your bones really guide the circulation along and inwards. Feel the breath moving in through your nose and relaxing out of your mouth. Noticing the weight ratio on your right hip to your upper right arm should be a little dominant in your hip, the opposing hip that you're stretching. And feel once the sand gets removed, hold off on rolling out and being too reactive yet here. Feel where that left leg is crossed over. And then what you're gonna do is roll onto the back, but slide that left foot to the right knee. So you're all rolling into a reclining pigeon pate spatially, and then knees to the chest. Hold on the back of the right leg or below the right knee. And then as you hug the legs in, I want you to let that left foot be where it's comfortable on your right lower upper leg. So if it's not comfortable close to the knee, you can put a little higher. And when it touches the quad, you know, the quad is sort of insensitive, right? Unless it's getting a vulnerable stretch, right? It doesn't, it's kind of a dull space, right? It's a nice shield. You'll notice how rigid it gets when you stretch it, right? It being such a shielded piece. So we'll take a few more of these back poses, one more, and then we'll start to get upright. So I want you to get a feel here of that positioning of the hold of the back of the right leg. Squeeze the legs in. Feel the extension of that core through the inner thighs. And then as you uncross, hold your ankles. And, you know, some care with the knees here. So if I hold my ankles and then I put my feet down, generally my feet are they're gonna expand. They're gonna move outwards, right? Because I can't keep my feet in line with my knees and without hurting something. So what I want you to do is flex your feet when they're in the air right now, before they go down to the floor. And then really get the feet to kind of span out like you're trying to spread the bottom of your feet, the skin at the bottom. You know, there's some circulation and life force there, but they get stepped on a lot, so they get a little dull, huh? So feel that resistance, and then I want you to push into your hands, the very top of the foot, right? Right at the ankle. Push that up into your hands so there's resistance. It's like, yeah, that's not really that fun to do. And now bring your hands to the floor. So you know about the range of your foot close to your buttocks now. Palms down, and then lower your excited feet to the ground. They've been super expressive. Now keep the balls of the feet pressing down. Try to keep your toes up, at least 8 of them. Okay, keep the toes up and then press down through the mound of the big toes so you can kind of feel if you make a footprint, like in your shoe when you look at the soles, right? You notice that one dent right at the bottom of the toes that's really full, right? Don't know what kind of soles you use, but you know, in the stuff that you put in the shoe, not the bottom of the shoe. Okay, so when you push down into your feet, you're gonna lift up the hips. And as you lift up your hips, notice if you don't want your blanket, you can take it away. Push down your feet, lift up the hips so the front of the thighs are really warmed up. Relax your toes, that kind of feels nice. Lift up your chest. The only thing missing is that you got this upper body, right? The chest, sternum to your face that's still stuck on the floor. If you could get that to lift, you'd have a little bit more of a full core stretch, like a full back bend. This is how we roll. So as you lift up, this is how we do this in restorative. This is as far as we'll go. But can you bring your shoulders down, like you're pushing down the upper back a little bit? And then feel when you swing your arms overhead, what happens with your lift of your hips. If you go higher or slide a little farther back to stretch through the vertebrae. Okay. Now, as you lower down, I want you to keep your upper back lifted right now. I know you can't go very fast. Really warm thighs. Quads are really heated here. Now, if you lift up your heels, it will ease it up a lot. But I want you to keep your heels down and then scoop your tailbone under like you're trying to get your tail to reach forward between the legs. So you're going to keep your tail reaching and lower your spine down by the tail reaching. And spine goes down. Front of the thighs are still pretty warm. And then as soon as your back is printing into the floor, making a nice vertebral leaf print, then reach for your bolster and put it to the left side and take your body enough to the right of your mat that you got some space going on. Left leg down, right leg crosses to the bolster. Now, hopefully that made some sense on the load in your leg, but we'll do one more back pose before we come up. So I want the legs to be kind of warm for movement. And then as I guide my sand on my right leg, I'm going to work on opening through this right layer of my outer thigh. So the farther out your bolster goes to the left may help out, right? It could. The inside of the right knee likely needs to be relaxed on the bolster, though. You don't want it to be kind of on the edge, on the fritz. You don't want it to get too fried trying to hold itself down. So you might put your mind in a little bit of like some box in the brain or some maybe the basement of it, wherever you can think of your structure. Start to place some of that awareness in your brain. Maybe when you start class, you access that. But here's a structural curiosity, is this layer, because I'm trying to dissect my focus and my ability to hydrate these tissues on my right leg, the outer leg, so much that it will be really helpful for my lower back and my whole back energetically, and also start to help me with the glutes releasing. Again, that's the low back helper. And then feel the core in the twist. So turn right, head turns, arm opens, and left arm can be free or hands on, the left hand onto that right leg. Okay, now try to stay with that right leg energetically. If your mind gets a little gripped or jaw clenched, you can relax the jaw, the face. Good. And then feeling if there's one more dose of bending in that right leg that you have in you. You know, like you can feel your right foot slide a little bit, feel the crease of the knee, those little tiny movements, and then settle into that improved range of motion, right? Flexibility in the hip. You can also do this by trying to point your knee, over to that left side, but you want to keep the mount of the leg on the bolster. You have to keep that mounted on the bolster. So a few more moments We are going to be coming up in a moment. So get all those being on your back enjoyed brain relaxation sensations in before you go to wake up your eyes coming up, just because you don't want to fall out of your poses. So get a feel here where the hip layer is crossing. I guess we got one more pose on our back now. Take the sand aside and bring the leg pattern in with the spine. So you might bring your arms to cactus here and see if you can trust your core balance. So you roll carefully to your back and slide the right foot to the left knee and join that knee with your right foot as you roll into your back, slide the left foot in, and then push into your left foot to get your spine centered, and then bring your knees to your chest. That can sometimes be assimilated. If you feel like you're in a Feldenkrais class, that's where you're at there. But kind of assimilating these coordinated experiences through the lower mid body. The one area that's sort of left out so far is a little bit of this upper, right? So it's been kind of our root, our anchor for a while. So feel when you are holding the back of that left leg. The left foot could go up, it could go down. You don't have to pump the leg here, but feel a direct relationship into that hip. And then I want you to start to release the grip with your hands. And as you roll up to sitting, take some moments of exploring the spine and the connection into the legs when you roll up. Like feel when you come up, the connection into the back of the pelvis to try to balance. If you come up and your feet come down, that's great, right? Then you can try getting your feet back up. It's no problem, especially if you have no clue what the connection is. That's a reason to put your feet down. So hold the back of the legs, okay? Get familiar with this grip. And then as you hold and clutch, I want you to draw the knees in and then feel if you can simply kick up your feet and where the back of the legs push into your hands. Now, even though your visualization feel like if you visualize, this has similarities to down dog with the legs, it's true. So feel the legs push into your hands though. Okay, keep that awareness. That's the key here. The legs push into the hands. The hands have to push into the legs, otherwise you drop them. And then bend your knees and bring your blankie in, belt away. Bring the blanket so it's in a quarter fold. And then come around to kneeling a little bit. You don't have to make it exhausting for your kneecaps, but find a ledge on your blankie. And I want you to actually just go ahead and take dog pose. Lift up your knees, stretch your heels down, push your floor away with your hands and your arms. Now, if dog pose is not in your repertoire today, you can pull your elbows, push them down. You're gonna pull your shirt, but then put your elbows down and lift up your knees and your hips and notice the difference in the legs. So I want you to try to reach your heels to the floor. That's the key. And find one of those directions, come up and down until you notice the energy of the arms working. I want you to feel your arms pushing the floor away, whether it's elbows or hands. Okay. Now come back to your knees and then walk your hands forwards. Now there's no bolster needed under your core right this moment, but reach your hips down and have the feet so they're spaced out enough on your mat so your low back is comfortable. That might be moving your knees apart, and that might be feeling your legs slightly, your hips kind of turned out a little bit, but maintain this pressure and then lower down onto your tummy. If your blankie is uncomfortable, you might have to scoot back on it or flatten it out. But on the elbows, you're gonna reach your core forward in Sphinx pose and really reach through your elbows down And feel if your feet have any relationship yet. Mine don't truly. Okay, now slide your hands back under your shoulders, elbows by your sides. Push and come up, and then add a block between your feet. Block is wide. Yeah. Now, if this blanket feels too bunched up under your knees, you can always switch it out a little bit. I mean, it just might be too bulky and impede your progress. So don't make it so you're uncomfortable with that. So my ankles are pushing into my block. And now when I come forward and lower down, I can have my hands down, I can have my elbows down. I'm going to go down to the elbows, work with this part, and push into your block. Actually, you're squeezing the block with your leg bands, right? Imagine it's like a band. You're squeezing inwards right now. I don't know how the band idea comes in there. It doesn't make sense, does it? That's if you're pulling it apart. So the elbows are down, the ribs are forwards, push into your block and feel that arch in the spine, a very kind expression through the front of the body, through the navel center, right to the rib tips. Breathe. Squeeze into the block, that's key. And now as you start to lower your head down, you're going to slide your hands back, and we're all going to try forearm dog pose. So we're going to have that block number 2 between your hands. And likely when you hold on to this block, we're going to do some tricep focus too, but I want you to feel that you squeeze the block with your hands, but squeezing the block with your ankles is really going to be a little odd at the moment, right? It's going to feel like overdrive. So try the focus with the arms first, squeezing, and then we're just on all fours, and then squeeze into that block between your feet. Kind of notice, squeeze. And then there's this whole mid body that just doesn't really know if it's part of the picture, okay? So what I want you to do when you hook your toes under is push that block away that's between your feet. Just kind of kick it over, get rid of it. And then lift up your knees and stretch your heels towards the floor. They may be really high up, and push the arms down into the elbows and strengthen into your upper body. So feel that reach down to the heels, lower down the knees, move your block away, crawl to get a bolster, and then we'll take the bolster across the mat in front of us and place the block between our hands and our elbows on the bolster, and then stretch our head between the arms, and bolster is supporting our elbows. Okay, I'm going to show you a variation. I was workshopping with someone the other day that I was being taught it. I was learning. But the other variation is that you have your elbows on the block like this, right? And you're here. Ugh. You gotta take glasses off to do that. And then you have to drop on, down, down, down. So I'm doing a version that's very considered awfully mellow and a traditional one for sure. But just notice there are options that are more intense that you could challenge yourself with if you want. Head to the bolster, hands holding the block wide, just a few more seconds. Whew. Feel the difference in the arms. Breathe. And now as you come up, these are all just getting into your bloodstream. You're going to push down to your hands. You have a block over here. Place it between your feet so it's at its mid-width. So you can hook your toes under besides the block and it doesn't bother you. And then arch the spine. Feel the tail push back and up into cow. And round your back into cat. And really try to let your tail move downwards towards the floor or the block. Inhale, chest pushes down a little bit, arch the spine, cow. Exhale, hollow the belly, chin towards the chest. Now, when the hands are full of it, you're going to lift up your knees and walk your hands back to your feet. Now, if you've got a lot of blanket here like me, you might fold it up so it's not going to intrude on your stepping. But when you come up here, take Uttanasana, take your forward bend, and your hands could be on your blanket. They could hold the legs. They could hold each other's elbows. Hold each other, each elbow. Cross the arms to do those experiences, and then feel your head weight dangle forwards and downwards. Now, if you have some concern here about your spine, safety, right? Some people feel a little more certain if their hands are touching their legs. It just feels like it's structurally, they feel a little more structurally safe when they push in with their hands when they're doing a spinal flexing pose. So I want you to just be clear, if you're holding your elbows and your spine is in flexion right now, and you feel grounded in your feet, you can feel your hamstrings, you're safe. But if you can't feel that and they're shaky, put your hands on the legs and hold the legs. Now, before we come up, I want you to start to move your knees into their natural bending suggested experience to give you a boost to get moving. So just bend them. Take the block, put it between your knees so the block is at its mid-width, or I don't know if my blanket will be okay. My block is in its narrow width for me. So I'm going to squeeze the block, and I want you to try to work your weight back into your heels. Lift up your toes. So my toes are lifting. Weight is back into my heels. So this is as far as I'm really going to come up with feeling comfortable in my knees. Now, some people are going to feel comfortable sitting farther back in chair pose, but the key is the toes are up right now. So when I sit back and I have this angle through my pelvis, as long as your knees are not showing you signs of grief right now, you're okay, then stay with the crease. If you lower down your hips a little further, arms forward, and you're okay with it, you might be able to go lower. It depends on your, this whole patella situation from the quad down, if it feels grippy and tighter. Now I want you to straighten out as much as straight can be for you and push your hips a little forwards. Stretch so you're in kind of a bow shape, right? You can't see my full upper, but you're reaching your arms up and back, your palms are facing in, and you're lengthening that front line of the body. Breathe. Now, when you stretch up, bring your hands over to your left. They can be together, they can be apart. Keep the heart really working by lifting up your ribs. And then come back, try to keep your carriage up and lean over to your right side. Okay, keep that squeeze of the block. It's there for a reason. And then pull up the thighs to lift yourself back center. And then carefully bend through the knees and take that block out, sneak it out, and turn to your left. Actually, turn to your left. So wherever you're on your mat, you're going to turn left so your legs are in a almost as wide as you can go stance, almost. And then tip forward so the inner thighs get the stretch. Take 1 to 2 blocks under your hands and then come into a wide stance, toes inwards, turn them in. Feel your hips reach back. And if your inner thighs feel zero stretch, then you need to come out a little wider on your stance. And I want you to keep the focus on the legs. So the hips stretch back, the seat goes back, and the hands lower down. And if you go down to the floor and that is your level, then you do go down to the floor. If you find your level is on your block, stay up. But if you're starting to hinge here in your shoulders and they're pulling in towards your ears, you're limiting yourself. You want to go farther so that you want to take that complete stretch. And then bow downwards, right? So you're bowing in, so your spine is in that full extension. And let the head lower down and breathe. Feel the breath moving. Feel the thighs lifting up at the kneecaps, draw them up. And it's kind of an awkward, interesting pattern. This is going to be a prep for pigeon today. So I want you to feel how your hips push back and the inner thigh awareness lengthens. So this might mean for you that you want to kind of bend one knee and stretch the inner thigh and the other leg. So you're kind of alternating, but just be aware and attentive to how this feels around the side of the knee. So if that feels like, oh, that's kind of an eerie pull on my knee, then you want to stay with the really standard. I'm just here with my legs in the same symmetry. I'm not going to change it, and I'll push my hips back. So hopeful that it will be fine. Lots of load in your feet. Really load your feet here. Use your body weight in your feet. This is part of weight bearing poses, is bearing your weight, right? Okay, now turn to your wonderful right foot with blocks, one or two. Hopefully you can find your other one if you have two. I guess some people end up buying one block at a time, huh? Okay, so feel where you have that lunge in that right leg. Feel the knee above the ankle. I want you to present that knee just above the right ankle. I think for symmetry, we'll have to get both sides, but feel the left leg back and lower the knee above the blanket. And I want you to keep it above the blanket, scoot the right foot forward so the knee is above the ankle. Keep that poise so you feel the right heel down, the left leg stretching back. Okay, now when you change sides, bring the left foot forward. So spring off the foot, push into your right foot to feel the hips in the back stretch, head maybe down, and then bring the right foot back. Okay, so feel that right thigh reaching. So we're going to be very specific how we do our final spinal today. We're going to clear out into a couple pigeons, clear out some pigeons, and then put our legs up at a wall. So a clear circulation situation here. Now feel the back knee lower. Make sure that there is some energy reaching through your thighs. Yeah, anticipate your right knee will go down soon. So you're going to move a blanket so it's down under the leg. I want you to use this as kind of a pure patterning for pigeon knee. And so as I put my blocks a little bit out, I'm going to use my hands touching the floor for me to get across. Some people might use a bolster. This is really kind of nice. Walk the left foot toe heel to the right, and then slide the foot back. And then as you stretch your left foot back and try to find your seat on the blanket, we've been doing the class with one blanket this whole time. So if you need a second one under your seat, use it, take one. But as your bolster is under your hands, it creates that back bend, doesn't it? You can feel if your hands are on blocks of the bolster, the arch of the spine continues. So you don't want to lose it too soon. Once you kind of go the other way, it's hard to get your bounce back. So continue the cycle of spine strengthening. Is this a bones class today? I don't think so. It's all good for the bones. Now, once you've put some exuberance into your elbows, you might put your elbows on a bolster or the floor and give your hip a few moments of calculating the sensation. Bolster can stay under. You could put it over to the right side. If you don't like this version, you can kind of scoot it over to the right. As long as you notice that your hip points basically value directionally lowering down, right? So the front of the hip bones are lowering down versus you trying to like push your seat back. You're trying to sink down into this hip opener. Breathing. It only helps. Now when we swap the leg pointing forwards, you have some choices to shift. You could shift through a down dog pose. You could stay on the floor on the seated version, which is kind of nice. But if you do meander this way, you might scoot the weight into your left buttock. Yep. And then feel that right leg sneak forward. And then when you switch the leg, kind of feel the tip of the pelvis, or you tip it, right? And then the left leg stretches back. And that top of the back thigh, you want to try to get some reach through the hip crease, down through the quadricep, the veins in the front, and then down across the knee. Yeah, that's an interesting, we could have a whole nother 10 minutes on that knee part with this pose, but we do have to honor and respect our timing. So sometimes I can get to that time ending when I don't have a clock. That was that one class I taught, and I didn't have a clock, and I actually ended on time. So where do your elbows go? If you started with them down, it's a little more winded to get back up to that back bend, but you might be able to deliver that in your spine. And if your back muscles feel like the most pull across the bones, like it's kind of tightening and snug on the back muscles, we do want those to be kind of as hydrated as they can be. So if it's really dehydrated and tight back there, you might spend some energy with your elbows down for certain, and then feel that back kind of stretch, maybe a little bit of cat shape in your spine, see, and then feel the ribs move a little forwards. Really let the hip bones center. A pretty good pose. All in all, I mean, you can find ways of featuring your ribs a little more. You might move your bolster or your arms on the floor to the left and feel the connectivity. The back thigh, though, I think is a whole nother experience if you start to select the reach through the back foot. We'll keep hippish here. Wishing for good hips. So with the spine moving into the arms and the hips moving a little bit forward into the back of the pelvis. Just doing a little bit of study on that glute medius area and how that can relieve the back, even if you don't seem to have back issues. It's just nice to learn these things about stretching across the muscles and then strengthening those muscles too, which we did both today. Lots of bridge poses today. So lots of glute strength. So you have to get out for a walk before maybe it snows. So when you come up, or you can go walking in the snow if it gets here. So come around, and we're going to get our legs upside down. So what I want you to work with is, if you don't like getting to a wall and get upside down, you can do it in the middle of the room with your bolster under your pelvis. But you want to feel where the weight is in that right hip and sink into that hip. So you're using your arms to pull you over, and then bring the left leg band forward. You might take a mini moment here in Baddha Konasana. And then these legs, we're going to drain them out and flush them, okay? So you want a bolster and a blanket near a wall space. It's pretty easy, right? If you don't want to use a bolster, you can sit next to the wall, right? You can actually just put your back buttocks next to the wall and swing the legs up, and without a bolster, and still get some of that flushing of the legs. Okay, so when you have that flush, reversing the downward pull, not just in your organs, which is the regulation of an inversion for our digestive system, circulatory, vascular, but let's just feel if we have our sand on our soles and that traction and circulation delivery that threads down, well, it sheds through the legs. And even if you don't consciously consider yourself to have a large amount of fluid retention in your legs during the day, if you're fatigued at the end, there's got to be something of that going on in your body's systems. So just reversing the gravitational flow is a way to rejuvenate. So let the back of the pelvis feel it's lightly arching and pressing the tailbone into the bolster. Okay, so we've safely arrived here. Good. Feel the back of your head resting. And then if your arms can go to cactus or straight back behind you, slide your attention through that corridor of the ribs up into the kind of snugness around the heart. And notice where there's fluidity in the core, and then up near the heart space and the lungs, it's somewhat snug in there. So work on liberating your breath so it really gets expansive, like you're filling up your body, filling up the belly, it expands. And then as you exhale, empty the lungs. Breathe in through the nose, belly full, relax out of the mouth. Keep the mouth pretty soft and relaxing down into your throat. Receiving the pose and this whole practice that we've moved through today. So tap into that collective, even though there is kind of a sweetness to having that home practice and connecting at the same time. So feel that safety in your space and in your practice. Now finally, if your eyes are resting, noticing the skin cells in the face, that circulation from the inversion. And we're going to revolve that space, right? The face space is going to move in a few moments, and it'll be in that, what you might think of as upright. And when I move the legs distant from the wall, you want to feel the knees when they bend, and then the balance of the buttocks, right? It's like you've created a balance, in your body from the practice. Some might be more apparent than others. But when you let go of that sand off your feet, you're going to carry your body's weight from the back of the pelvis into the thighs, knees to chest, and then carefully let your body either roll to the side if you want to remain at the wall with your legs back up without sand through the end of the session and beyond. You're welcome to roll around to come up for those of us coming up, and just place your body in a fairly motionable position, maybe on a blanket, and let your spine center up from the back of the pelvis, and feeling that connectivity through the breath into the space of the lower belly. Reach your hands up to unity in front of your heart. Brain bows into the heart center, surrendering here. And with the gaze lowered inwards, connecting to the others in the practice and beyond this room, inhale together. And with exhalation, slow inwards, bowing into your heart. Namaste. Thank you. Okay, we got our pigeons in.
Yes, thank you.
From hips.